Millionaire orders. Elderly woman off the plane claiming she smelled bad, but hours later he learns a lesson he'll never forget. Ethan Morgan strode through Sao Paulo airport like a king in his castle, flanked by bodyguards protecting him from any intruders. He was used to being the center of attention, and the admiring glances from passengers and staff only fed his inflated ego. Dressed in a perfectly tailored designer suit, he ignored greetings and curious looks. A young attendant trying to be helpful approached him. "Mr. Morgan, can I assist you with your luggage?" he asked, a nervous smile on his face. "I don't need your help, thank you," Ethan replied in a curt tone that made it clear he wasn't in the mood for interruptions. He continued on his way, leaving the attendant speechless as murmurs about his arrogance spread among the passengers. Across the terminal, Donna Mildred watched the commotion with a gentle smile. At 70 years old, she had learned that true wealth lies in the little things. A smile, a friendly conversation, and of course her aromatic herbs. With her bag filled with packets of tea and fresh herbs, she felt like a time traveler, bringing the aroma of nature with her. As she made her way to the boarding gate, she noticed children playing near a water fountain. She approached them and smiled, waving her hand, making the little ones giggle with joy. What bright little eyes. "Are you ready for a grand adventure?" Donna Mildred said, her voice soft and encouraging. "Yes, Grandma," the children replied in unison, while their mothers watched, grateful for the warm interaction. Finally, it was time to board. Donna Mildred found her seat next to Ethan, who was already engrossed in his laptop, typing furiously. As the elderly woman settled in, the smell of her herbs began to permeate the small space between them. Ethan frowned, annoyed by the unexpected invasion of scents that distracted him from his work. "Excuse me," he called to flight attendant Amy, who was passing by with a beverage cart. "Can you remove this woman from my side, please? The smell of those herbs is unbearable." Donna Mildred, who was organizing her things, looked up, surprised by Ethan's aggression. "Oh dear, you don't need to worry. They're just herbs, and I'm sure they're pleasant for those who appreciate them," she replied with a kind smile, trying to ease the situation. "Yes, but I don't appreciate them," Ethan insisted, crossing his arms and looking at Amy with disdain. "I don't want to sit here smelling that." Amy, accustomed to dealing with difficult passengers, took a deep breath and responded, "Mr. Morgan, unfortunately, there are no available seats for relocation at the moment, but I can bring a neutralizing spray to help." "That's not what I asked for," Ethan retorted, his voice rising and drawing the attention of nearby passengers. "Just do what I say." Donna Mildred, sensing the growing tension, decided to intervene. "Dear, there's no need to get upset. We're all here to enjoy this flight. How about we take a deep breath and enjoy the journey together?" Ethan stared at her, unsure how to respond to her calm demeanor. He wasn't used to being challenged so serenely. The elderly woman, with her tranquil expression and eyes reflecting a life full of experiences, seemed almost the antithesis of his arrogant persona. He simply looked away, focusing again on his screen, but the atmosphere around them began to vibrate with a peculiar tension, foreshadowing that this flight would not be just an ordinary trip. The plane took off smoothly, and as the passengers settled in, the tension in the air was palpable. Ethan Morgan, sitting by the window, dove into his laptop, completely ignoring the world around him. The sound of the engines and the gentle sway of the aircraft were nothing compared to his restless mind, racing 1,000 miles an hour over the business awaiting him in New York. He typed furiously, as if each word was a new conquest in his empire. Beside him, Donna Mildred gazed out the window with a serene smile. Her bag, filled with aromatic herbs, rested in her lap, and she couldn't contain her desire to converse. "What a wonderful view, don't you think?" she said, trying to capture the millionaire's attention. "It's always a pleasure to see the world from up high, like we're birds." Ethan, without taking his eyes off the screen, merely grumbled, "Yeah, sure." His voice was flat, and any attempt at interaction from the elderly woman seemed to be a nuisance. However, Donna Mildred remained undeterred. With a spark of determination, she decided to persist. "You know, I always bring my herbs with me. They have the power to calm the nerves. Would you like to try some?" Finally, Ethan looked at the elderly woman, his face marked by irritation. "No, thank you. What I need is silence. Can you please keep your herbs to yourself?" He returned his focus to the laptop, leaving Donna Mildred with an expression of disappointment, yet she remained positive. In the meantime, Josh, who was seated in the row behind them, watched the scene unfold with a mix of admiration and discomfort. He only knew Ethan from stories of success, but that arrogant attitude surprised him. "Come on, man," he muttered to himself. "That's no way to treat an older person." He remembered how his grandmother always said that respect and compassion were the keys to a fulfilling life. The atmosphere inside the plane began to shift as the aircraft climbed. The sound of the engines turned into a constant hum, and flight attendant Amy passed by again to check on passenger comfort. "Everything all right over there?" she asked, noticing the tension between Ethan and Donna Mildred. "It's all fine as long as this lady stops talking and with her herbs," Ethan replied without hesitation. The attendant was taken aback by his response, but maintained her composure. "If you need anything, I'll be around," she said before moving on, sensing that the situation could escalate. When the plane finally reached cruising altitude, a light turbulence began to be felt. The seatbelt signs illuminated, and the pilot's voice echoed through the cabin, alerting passengers to the possibility of instability. "Please keep your seatbelts fastened and remain in your seats," he informed, as the aircraft swayed gently. Before we continue with this exciting story, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories, and let us know in the comments which city you're watching this video from. At that moment, what had once seemed like an annoyance turned into a genuine panic. The passengers began to fidget, and Ethan's expression quickly shifted from disdain to concern. He closed his laptop, glancing around with a tense demeanor. The plane was shaking, and the screams of some passengers echoed through the cabin. Seeing the fear in Ethan's eyes, Mrs. Mildred took action. She grabbed the hand of a young man sitting beside her, who was visibly trembling. "Calm down, dear. Take a deep breath. We're all in this together," she said in a soft, reassuring voice. Looking at Ethan, she encouraged him. "You can calm down too. We'll all be fine." Ethan, who had previously felt invulnerable in his wealth, now found himself powerless in the face of the situation. The turbulence was not just physical. He felt a whirlwind of emotions raging inside him. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice a bit quieter, almost vulnerable. "It's just a bit of turbulence," Mrs. Mildred replied, still maintaining her calm expression. "Sometimes our lives go through turbulence too. The important thing is to stay calm and trust that everything will work out." Josh, who had been listening to the conversation, felt an urge to join in. "That's true. My grandmother always said that it's in difficult moments that we learn the most about ourselves." He looked at Ethan, who now wore a more relaxed expression, as if Mrs. Mildred's words and Josh's empathy were beginning to penetrate his armor of arrogance. "Maybe you should try some of the herbs, Ethan," Josh suggested, a smile playing on his lips. "It seems they're more than just an annoyance." Ethan hesitated, but looking at Mrs. Mildred's serene expression, he felt it might be time to open his mind and heart a little. The turbulence shook the plane as if it were a toy in the hands of a mischievous child. Passengers began to scream and cling to their armrests as the roar of the engines fought against the fear spreading through the cabin. Ethan Morgan, who had until then felt invincible in his fortress of wealth and power, now faced an abyss of insecurity. He took a deep breath, trying to control the adrenaline coursing through his veins, but the reality was brutally imposing. Beside him, Mrs. Mildred exuded an almost supernatural calmness. With a serene smile, she held the hand of a nearby passenger, a young man who seemed on the verge of a nervous breakdown. "Take a deep breath, dear," she whispered, her voice soft as a spring breeze. "Remember, this too shall pass, the clouds always clear." Ethan watched. Involuntarily, he found himself paying attention to the woman he had previously considered an inconvenience. Her tranquility was contagious, and he felt a wave of confusion mixed with admiration. How could she maintain that serenity amidst the chaos? The contrast between them couldn't have been more evident. He, surrounded by an armor of arrogance and power, she, enveloped in an aura of simplicity and wisdom. "Are you crazy?" Ethan finally allowed himself to speak, his voice sounding rougher than he intended. "We're about to die, and you're over there, throwing a party with herbs." Mrs. Mildred turned slowly to him, her eyes shining with a serene light. "My dear, life is made up of moments. This is just another one. What matters is how we face it. You can choose fear or hope. I choose hope." Josh, sitting behind them, couldn't help but admire Mrs. Mildred's courage. He felt that in some way the woman was not only calming the other passengers, but also challenging Ethan to confront his own reality. The young businessman hesitated, but his gaze remained fixed on Ethan, observing the transformation that began to take shape on his face. "You don't understand," Ethan said, his voice now softer, almost vulnerable. "I built my life on control. What's happening now is disastrous. Control is an illusion, Mrs. Mildred replied with a gentle smile. Life is full of uncertainties. Learning to dance with them is what keeps us alive. Try a little. It helps calm the nerves. She extended her hand, offering him hesitated, but the welcoming expression of Mrs. Mildred made him relent. He took the herb between his fingers, feeling its freshness in his palm. What if all of this is a sign, he thought, as he watched the woman beside him continue to comfort the other passengers. A sign that I need to rethink my life. The turbulence began to gradually ease, and the tension in the cabin also lifted. The passengers, now calmer, began to look at one another, sharing nervous smiles. The heavy atmosphere that had previously dominated the space was slowly replaced by a sense of unity. Josh, observing it all, felt his heart race. He remembered the stories his grandmother told about the importance of human connections, and those were the lessons he'd always wanted to learn, but had ignored in his pursuit of success. You're not so different from me, Ethan said, still holding the herb. We're both just trying to find our place in the world. Mrs. Mildred smiled, her gaze filled with understanding. Exactly, my young friend. We're all in search of something. Sometimes what we need is simply to stop and listen to the voice of our hearts. Josh felt a wave of inspiration surge within him. He realized that what was happening there was not just a conversation between a millionaire and an elderly woman. It was a meeting of souls, an exchange of experiences that transcended the physical confines of the airplane. He wanted to be part of this, to learn from Mrs. Mildred and maybe even from Ethan. The turbulence, which at first seemed like an end, was now a catalyst for something much greater. And so, between fear and hope, transformation began to blossom, not just within Ethan, but in all those aboard. As the plane finally began to stabilize after the severe turbulence, a profound relief washed over all the passengers. Ethan, with his heart still racing, looked around and noticed the fearful expressions that had settled on each face. He felt the arrogance he had once displayed dissipate, giving way to a vulnerability he was reluctant to acknowledge. Beside him, Mrs. Mildred remained serene, like an unyielding rock amidst the storm. Mrs. Mildred, with her gentle and welcoming gaze, "Are you okay, young man?" to Et, she asked, her voice sweet as honey. Ethan hesitated before responding. "I don't know. I'm not used to feeling this way," he admitted, the fragility in his voice surprising even himself. "Feeling fear is normal, Ethan. It's a part of life," said Donna Mildred, maintaining a smile that radiated calm. "But you should know that, just like a storm, this too shall pass." He turned to her, feeling the sincerity in her words. "I'm sorry for being so rude to you before. I just didn't know how to deal with what was happening." "Oh dear, there's no need to apologize. Sometimes life puts us in situations that challenge our understanding. You're not the only one feeling this way," replied Donna Mildred, with the wisdom that comes only with experience. "The important thing is to learn from these moments." Ethan felt a knot unraveling in his chest. "You're an incredible person, Donna Mildred. I didn't realize this before." He looked into her eyes, seeking the truth she emanated. "What do you do here with these herbs?" Donna Mildred smiled, her eyes shining with nostalgia. "These herbs have the power to heal, but not just the body. They can also calm the mind and spirit. Each one has a story, a purpose. I used to prepare teas for my husband when he was sick, and it always brought us closer," she said, almost in a whisper, as if the memory was sacred. "I don't have that in my life. I've always been so focused on building my empire that I ended up forgetting to take care of myself and the people around me," Ethan confessed, feeling more exposed than he would have liked. Donna Mildred leaned slightly forward, as if sharing a secret. "What you thought was success might just be a prison, dear. The true value of life lies in the connections we make and the stories we tell. Every person we meet has something to teach us, if only we stop to listen." Josh, sitting behind them, observed the conversation, increasingly inspired. He watched Ethan, the man he had always admired, shedding his armor and revealing his insecurities. It was a scene that challenged his own beliefs about power and success. He remembered the stories his grandmother used to tell about how human relationships were the fabric of life. "Donna Mildred, do you really believe we can change?" Ethan asked, his voice a bit firmer now. "Of course. Change begins within us, when we decide to look at others with empathy and respect. It's never too late to start being the person you want to be," she replied, with a sincerity that seemed to touch the depths of Ethan's soul. He took a deep breath, feeling her words penetrate his being. "I want to change. I want to learn to value the people around me. But how do I do that?" "Start by listening, my child. Hear the stories of others. Share your own, and allow yourself to be vulnerable. The world is a tapestry of experiences, and by connecting you will begin to see the beauty that exists in each of us, Donna Mildred answered, her voice soft like a spring breeze. In that moment, Ethan realized that the turbulence had not just been a terrifying experience, it was in fact a catalyst for a transformation he hadn't known he needed. He looked at Donna Mildred, and a wave of gratitude surged in his heart. Life, he thought, was more than just money and power. It was about love, respect, and above all, the connections we make along the way. The turbulence finally began to ease, and the plane regained stability. Ethan, still visibly shaken, looked at Donna Mildred, who continued to radiate an impressive calm. The flight attendant, Amy, who had been watching everything with concern, approached the two, determined to promote a dialogue that could alleviate the lingering tension in the air. "How are you both feeling now?" Amy asked with a gentle smile. "That was quite a moment, wasn't it?" Donna Mildred, with her serene and welcoming gaze, replied, "I'm fine, dear. For me, every turbulence is just a reminder that life always has its ups and downs. What matters is how we choose to face these moments." Ethan, still trying to process the experience he had just gone through, felt compelled to share. I didn't expect this to happen. It was frightening. I used to think that all my money and power made me invulnerable. Now I see that this is just an illusion." Amy noticed the vulnerability beginning to emerge in Ethan, and how Donna Mildred looked at him with empathy. "You know, Ethan," she began, "often people who are very successful feel lonely. Power and wealth can create barriers instead of connections. What really matters are the relationships we build along the way." Ethan furrowed his brow, reflecting on her words. "You're right. Sometimes I wonder if people approach me for who I am or for what I have." Donna Mildred gave a gentle smile. "Yes, dear. I experience this differently. I've lost a lot throughout my life, but I've learned that love and the experiences we share are what truly matter. The herbs I carry always remind me of the little things that make life beautiful. They have stories and meanings just like we do." "These herbs, you always carry them with you?" Ethan asked, intrigued. "Yes," replied Donna Mildred, caressing her bag. "They connect me to precious memories of my youth and my late husband. He used to say that true wealth lies in simple things, like a warm tea on a cold day or a child's laughter." "I've never thought about it like that," Ethan admitted, his voice softer. "Maybe I've lost myself in the pursuit of more money and status." "It's easy to lose yourself," Amy interjected, "especially when society values material success so much. But the true measure of success is how we treat others and the connections we form." Donna Mildred nodded, looking directly into Ethan's eyes. "You have an opportunity, my young man. An opportunity to change the way you see the world and the people around you. Life is a series of moments, and each one is a chance to learn and grow." Ethan felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. "Thank you, Donna Mildred. I really didn't know what to expect from you when I boarded this flight, but now I see how valuable your wisdom is. I feel like I'm starting to understand some things. And this is just the beginning," Donna Mildred said softly. "It's never too late to change and learn. We all have something to teach and something to learn. That's how we grow." As the conversation flowed between the three of them, the atmosphere around them began to shift. The fear and tension that had once dominated the environment were giving way to something more positive. Ethan felt a new sense of purpose beginning to form within him. He was, for the first time, open to seeing others not just as figures in his life, but as companions on a journey, each with their own stories and experiences. Amy, sensing the growing connection, smiled and decided to contribute to the conversation. "That reminds me of a quote I once read. The true measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort, but where he stands in times of challenge." "That's a beautiful quote," Ethan commented. "I think I've always been concerned with maintaining my image and status, without realizing that it didn't make me a true leader." Mrs. Mildred placed her hand on Ethan's arm in a gesture of support. "And now you have the chance to become a true leader, one who inspires and uplifts others. Never underestimate the power of a kind action or an encouraging word." Ethan looked at Mrs. Mildred, feeling grateful for her presence. "I want that. I want to be someone that people respect not just for what I have, but for who I am and what I do." Mrs. Mildred smiled, pleased to see a spark of transformation in Ethan's eyes. "And you've already begun, dear. Remember that every small step counts." The atmosphere on the plane had changed. The turbulence that had once brought panic and despair now created an atmosphere of empathy and connection. Ethan Morgan, who had previously seen himself as a superior being immune to human frailty, now looked at Mrs. Mildred with a different gaze. He felt as if a curtain had been pulled back, revealing the humanity that had always been there, but that he had refused to see. Mrs. Mildred, with her sweet and serene demeanor, managed to penetrate the defenses of the millionaire. "You know, my dear," she began, her voice soft and soothing, "life is made up of moments, and sometimes the simplest ones are the most important. In fact, I always say that the herbs I carry with me are not just for flavor, but to remind me of the stories they hold." Ethan, still a bit shaken, sat closer to her. He was curious, something he hadn't felt in a long time. "Stories? What do you mean by that?" His voice was softer, almost shy. "Oh, my young man, each herb has a story." Mrs. Mildred smiled, as if sharing a secret. "Basil, for example, is an herb of love and protection. Whenever I use it, I remember my late husband who loved to cook with it. He used to say that basil brought joy to the table." She looked at Ethan with a sparkle in her eyes. "And you, what brings joy to your life?" Ethan hesitated. It was a question he had never considered. I have a lot of money, but I don't know if that's really joy. Sometimes I feel like I'm surrounded by people who only care about what I can offer." Mrs. Mildred nodded, understanding the pain that emanated from his words. "Loneliness is a treacherous companion, isn't it? What do you think you could do to change that?" Josh, watching from his seat, felt a weight in his stomach. He had always admired Ethan's confidence, but now he saw a vulnerable man. He remembered conversations he had with his grandmother about the importance of human relationships. "Ethan," Josh dared to interrupt, "maybe you should try to connect more, not just with people who can help you, but with those who can become your friends. Life is more than just financial success." Ethan looked at Josh, surprised by the interruption. "Do you really believe that?" He had never considered the possibility that friendship could be more valuable than status. "Absolutely," Josh replied, feeling more confident. "Human connection is what truly shapes us. I used to think that success was everything, but now I see that the experiences we share with people are what really make us rich." Mrs. Mildred smiled. "See, my dears, this is what herbs teach us. Each has its role, and together they create something wonderful. So are the people in our lives." Ethan, moved by Mrs. Mildred's words and Josh's sincerity, felt a new understanding arise within him. He looked at Mrs. Mildred and said, "You know, I didn't used to value these interactions. I was so focused on being the best that I forgot what really matters." The conversation flowed naturally, like a river finding its way. Mildred shared more stories about her life, her challenges and her joys. Each tale was a new revelation and an invitation to reflect for Ethan and Josh. "I always say," Mrs. Mildred said with a sparkle in her eyes, "that each of us has a purpose in this world. Sometimes it's just a matter of opening our eyes to see it." Ethan nodded, deeply touched. "I want to change," he said, almost in a whisper. "I want to learn to see the people around me, not just as numbers or employees, but as human beings." Josh smiled, feeling that something special was happening there. "And that starts with small changes, Ethan. A kind gesture here, a listening ear there. You'll be surprised at what can happen." As the three continued their conversation, the initial tension of the flight completely dissipated, giving way to an atmosphere of solidarity and understanding. The passengers around them, once caught up in their own fears, were now paying attention to the transformative exchange taking place. The connection between them was forming, like the herbs Mrs. Mildred brought, each contributing to a new recipe for life. The plane, now stabilized after the turbulence, continued its trajectory toward New York. The atmosphere on board had drastically changed. The tension that had once dominated the space was replaced by a sense of camaraderie and solidarity. Ethan, who had previously surrendered to fear, now felt lighter, almost renewed. He looked at Mrs. Mildred, who still wore her serene smile, and recalled the words she had spoken during the storm. It was as if a revelation had occurred within him. When the seatbelt sign was turned off, Ethan stood up, determined to do something he had never considered before. He turned to Mrs. Mildred, who was still by his side, enthusiastically chatting with Amy, the flight attendant, about the herbs she carried. "Mrs. Mildred," he began, his voice a bit hesitant but firm, "I would like to apologize again. I really shouldn't have been so rude. You've shown me a perspective I've never considered before." Mrs. Mildred turned to him, her eyes shining with understanding. "Oh dear, don't worry about it. We all have our moments. What's important is to learn from them." She smiled, a smile that seemed to illuminate the environment around her. Life is made of lessons and you're on your way to a new beginning. Ethan felt a warmth in his chest. I would love to do something to make up for this. How about tea in New York? I would love to learn more about your herbs and the wisdom you carry. Donna Mildred's expression brightened even more. It would be an honor, Ethan. I love sharing what I've learned throughout my life. Herbs have so much to teach us, not just about cooking, but about life itself. Josh, who had been listening intently to the conversation, saw an opportunity to join this new friendship that was forming. He rose from his seat and with a shy smile interjected, "Can I join you? I would also love to learn more about the herbs and, who knows, hear some of Donna Mildred's stories." Donna Mildred looked at Josh, delighted by the proposal. "Of course, young man. The more the merrier. Stories are always richer when shared." She then looked at Ethan, a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. "It seems we have a little gathering of potential friends." Ethan nodded, a genuine smile on his face. "Yes, it will be great. I never thought that a simple flight could lead to something so meaningful. I'm looking forward to hearing your stories, Donna Mildred. You seem to have lived a life full of valuable experiences." "Oh, my dear, I have many stories," she said, winking, "and every herb I bring has its own story. Some are about love, others about loss, but all have a purpose, just like us." Josh, excited by the conversation, chimed in, "That's amazing. I've always believed that life experiences are what truly shape us. What do you think, Ethan?" Ethan hesitated for a moment, reflecting on what he had just experienced. "I used to think that success and money were the most important things, but this experience made me realize that human connections and the stories we share are what truly matter." Donna Mildred nodded, pleased with the transformation she was observing. "Exactly. That's why I always say we should cultivate our relationships like we cultivate our herbs, with care, love, and respect." As the conversation flowed naturally among them, the atmosphere in the plane gradually became lighter and more friendly. Initially, they were just strangers sharing a space, but now they were becoming friends. Ethan and Josh exchanged glances, both aware that something special was blossoming there, a result of the vulnerability and empathy that had been awakened during that flight. As the plane began its descent, the excitement and enthusiasm felt by the three of them were palpable. The challenges of the past faded away, making room for a new future that lay before them, full of possibilities. The friendship that had sprouted amidst the turbulence was a clear sign that life had a curious and surprising way of bringing people together, even in the most unexpected circumstances. As the plane approached New York Airport, the atmosphere inside the cabin was charged with renewed energy. The passengers, once tense and anxious, were now exchanging smiles and lively conversations. Ethan Morgan, still somewhat shaken by the experience he had just lived through, looked around and felt an inexplicable weight lift from his shoulders. He turned to Donna Mildred, who was sitting beside him, and saw the glow of satisfaction in her gaze. "You really stood out during the turbulence, Donna Mildred," Ethan remarked, his voice a bit hesitant but sincere. "I never imagined that a simple conversation and some herbs could transform the entire atmosphere." The elderly woman smiled, her serene expression lighting up her face. "Ah, dear, life is made up of little moments. Sometimes all we need is a bit of empathy and connection. The herbs help, but what truly matters is the heart we put into each gesture." Ethan nodded, absorbing her words as if they were a revelation. He looked at Josh, who was just behind them, watching the scene with an expression of admiration. "Josh, you saw that too, didn't you? The way Donna Mildred calmed everyone. That's something I would love to learn to do." Josh smiled, recognizing the transformation happening around him. "Yes, Ethan, it was incredible. I've never seen anyone handle such a chaotic situation so calmly. It made me realize that what really matters are human connections, not money or status." As the plane began to descend, Ethan felt something within him changing fundamentally. The loneliness that had always accompanied him, even when surrounded by people, felt less oppressive. He now understood that there was more to life than accumulating wealth and maintaining a facade of success. With the plane finally landed, passengers started preparing to disembark. Ethan stood up, still reflecting on everything he had learned. He looked at Donna Mildred and, in an unexpected gesture, said, "Donna Mildred, I would love to invite you for tea when we're in New York. I'd like to hear more about your herbs and your stories. I promise I'll be a good listener this time." Donna Mildred's eyes sparkled with joy. "Oh dear, that would be wonderful. I've always believed that every herb has a story to tell, just like us. I look forward to sharing more with you." Josh, who was about to join them, couldn't help but interject, "Can I come too? I'd love to learn more about what you have to teach, Donna Mildred." This trip made me realize I need to value the connections I make more. Of course, dear. The more the merrier. Life is a journey full of lessons, and I would love to have both of you by my side, Donna Mildred replied with a warm smile. As the plane arrived at the terminal, the energy of renewal still lingered in the air. The three of them formed a new friendship, a bond that seemed to bloom from the shared experience. When they disembarked, Donna Mildred paused for a moment and turned to Ethan and Josh. Remember, boys, life is precious. Don't let fear or ambition prevent you from seeing the beauty in the little things. Ethan, now feeling lighter, sensed that those words were a valuable reminder. He watched Donna Mildred walk away, leaving a small bundle of herbs in his hands. This is for you, Ethan, a symbol of our friendship, and a reminder to never forget what really matters. Thank you, Donna Mildred, he replied, his voice filled with emotion. I promise I will take care of this and everything I've learned from you today. As Donna Mildred walked away, Josh looked at Ethan and commented, You've really changed. It's inspiring to see how this experience affected you. Ethan smiled, a genuine smile that reflected the transformation that had occurred within him. I know, and I'm grateful for it. It all began with a simple interaction lessons come and a moment of unexpected situations. After landing in New York, Ethan Morgan felt different. The echoes of the conversation on the flight still reverberated in his mind, like a persistent whisper urging him to reflect on his actions. He looked around the bustling terminal, observing hurried people with their luggage, but everything felt lighter to him, as if a heavy layer had been lifted from his shoulders. Next to him, Josh wore a genuine smile, a reflection of the transformation they both had experienced. Ethan, you really seem different. What happened during that flight? Josh asked as they walked toward the airport exit. I'm not sure, Josh. I think I finally realized that I can be more than just a successful businessman. Ms. Mildred, she made me understand that life isn't just about numbers and achievements. There's a world out there worth exploring, and that includes the people around me, Ethan replied, a spark in his eyes. Josh nodded, recalling the simple yet powerful wisdom Ms. Mildred had shared. She's a true inspiration, isn't she? The way she cares for others. It made me think about how I've been conducting my life too. It's easy to get lost in ambitions and forget what truly matters. Yes, and I don't want to be that person anymore. I want to make changes, not just in my life, but in the lives of those around me. Starting with my employees, Ethan said, already envisioning a new path ahead. That same week, Ethan called a meeting with his entire team. The atmosphere in the room was tense. The employees were used to their boss's rigid and distant demeanor, but he was determined to change that. As he entered, he took a deep breath and, instead of his usual arrogance, adopted a friendlier tone. Everyone, I know that my approach might have been a bit difficult lately, but I want you to know that I recognize the value of each one of you, Ethan began, looking at the surprised faces around him. I've realized that the success of the company doesn't come just from sales and profits, but from the team behind it. I want to hear your ideas, your concerns, and really work together. Let's build an environment where everyone feels valued, he continued, feeling the weight of the words flowing from his mouth. One of the employees, Anna, who had remained silent until then, raised her hand timidly. Ethan, it's really good to hear this. We always felt like our voices weren't heard. If you really care, this could change everything. Ethan smiled back, feeling a warm glow in his chest. Yes, I do care. Let's create a space where everyone can express themselves, and I promise that from now on I'll strive to be more approachable. Meanwhile, Josh was also on his journey of transformation. He decided he wanted to launch a startup, but in a way that reflected the values he learned from Ms. Mildred. In a cozy cafe, he spoke with his friend Clara, a designer of sustainable products. Clara, I want to create something that really makes a difference. I don't just want to make money. I want to impact the community. I was thinking of a company that develops sustainable products and helps empower people in vulnerable situations, Josh explained, his passion evident. That's amazing, Josh. I believe there's a growing market for that. People are becoming more aware of their choices and the impact they have on the world. What do you need to get started? Clara asked, excited. I need a solid plan, and maybe some investors who share this vision. But more importantly, I want the company to have a social commitment. Every sale should contribute to a cause, whether it's educational, environmental, or health-related, Josh replied, feeling the adrenaline surge. In the following days, Ethan and Josh met frequently, sharing ideas and supporting each other on their journeys. Ethan committed to helping Josh find investors, and Josh, in turn, offered advice on how to create a healthier and more inclusive work environment at Ethan's company. "You know, Josh, I'm starting to realize that human relationships are more important than I ever imagined. It's not just about business, it's about building a community," Ethan said as they strolled through a park, enjoying the fresh spring breeze. Josh smiled, pleased to see this change in his friend. "Exactly. And when you open up to people, they open up to you too. That's how strong bonds are created." The transformation that began on a turbulent flight was now manifesting in concrete actions, as both sought not just individual success, but also a positive impact on the world around them. Months passed since that transformative flight, and Ethan Morgan was in his office in New York, engaged in a routine that, although still demanding, now included moments of reflection and empathy. He looked out the window, observing the frenetic movement of the city, and thought of Ms. Mildred. Since the unexpected encounter on the plane, he had committed to changing how he related to those around him. The employees who were once just numbers on a graph were now individuals with stories and aspirations. As he reviewed some documents, the phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. When he answered, the sweet and familiar voice of Ms. Mildred echoed from the other end of the line. "Ethan, my dear, how are you? I hope you're taking good care of yourself." "Hi, Ms. Mildred, I'm well, thank you. In fact, I've been thinking a lot about our conversations. You made me see the world differently," Ethan replied, a smile forming on his face. "Actually, I've implemented some changes in the company. I'm trying to be more approachable and listen to my employees more." "I'm so happy to hear that. Change starts within us and you're on the right path," she said, her voice radiating warmth and sincerity. "But I called for a specific reason. There's something I need to share with you." "Of course, what happened?" Ethan asked, sensing that the joviality of the conversation had given way to a more serious tone. "I am in fact a philanthropist. What you don't know is that I've been disguising myself as Ms. Mildred the herbalist to observe how people like you who have the power to make a difference treat others," revealed Ms. Mildred, sincerity echoing in her voice. "I wanted to see if you truly had the capacity for change that you seem to have. And Ethan, you've surprised me." Ethan fell silent, processing her words. What are you saying? Are you a philanthropist?" "Yes, dear. I dedicate my life to social causes. What I saw in you gave me those less fortunate. You committed to being better, and I want you to use this new perspective not just for yourself, but to help others as well," Donna Mildred continued in an encouraging tone. "That's amazing," Ethan finally managed to say. "I don't know if I'm up to such responsibility. You've already taken the first step. Now, I want to invite you to an event I'm organizing. It will be a grand charity gala, and I would love for you to be one of the speakers. You can share your journey and inspire others to join us in this mission," she suggested, hope evident in her voice. I would love to. Being part of this would be an honor," Ethan replied, feeling a new purpose rising within him. The conversation continued, and Donna Mildred explained the details of the event. When the call ended, Ethan felt lighter, as if a new life was pulsing inside him. Not only would he accept the invitation, but he would also commit to doing whatever it took to support the causes Donna Mildred championed. On the night of the event, the hall was illuminated and filled with influential and generous people, all there to make a difference. Ethan, dressed in a sharp suit, felt adrenaline coursing through his veins. He looked at the stage where Donna Mildred was about to give her presentation. As she began to speak, the room fell silent. "Good evening, everyone. Tonight we are here to celebrate human kindness and the power of transformation," Donna Mildred began, her eyes shining with passion. "I want to thank each of you for being here, and I would like to introduce someone who has undergone an incredible transformation in recent months. Please welcome Ethan Morgan." Applause echoed through the hall as Ethan stepped onto the stage, his heart pounding. He looked out at the audience, seeing curious and hopeful faces. "Good evening," he started, his voice steady. "I'm Ethan, and many of you know me as a successful businessman, but what you don't know is that I was someone who felt lost amid my own success. My journey began on a flight where I met the incredible Donna Mildred. She taught me that true value doesn't lie in money, but in human connections, and I'm here to say that all of us can make a difference." The room fell completely silent, everyone attentive. Ethan shared his story of transformation, his internal struggles, and how he decided he wanted to be more than just a businessman. He spoke about the importance of listening to others and building genuine relationships. As he finished, a wave of applause flooded the hall and he felt a surge of emotion. Donna Mildred, standing beside him, looked on with pride. "Did you see how change is possible?" she said, smiling. "True wealth resides in each of us, and together we can transform the world." The night continued with a spirit of solidarity, and Ethan felt a new era beginning in his life. He had not only changed, but he was now committed to using his influence to help others, alongside Donna, Mildred, and Josh, who was also present, sharing his inspiring ideas. Indeed, the transformation that occurred on that flight had become a movement, and everyone there was part of it. We've reached the end of this touching story. If you enjoyed it and want to see more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. Right now there's a playlist of videos on your screen. If you want to keep watching these moving stories, just click on it and you'll be all set. And now, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from, and leave your like to support our work. Now, a sincere question. Do you agree with what happened in the story? We want to know your opinion. Until the next video.